We're tracking chances of severe storms moving back into the area in the next couple of days. Matt will break down when and where we can expect the greatest severe weather threat. That's coming up in just a bit. Plus, a county commissioner in Oklahoma resigning today as federal investigators look into reports that he and the sheriff conspired to kill 2 journalists. And a tragedy narrowly avoided at the True Grit Running Company in Fort Smith, a car crashing through the storefront. We're going to bring you that surveillance video of the moment the car crashed through the front door.
Covering news where you live. This is 5 News at 6.
We begin tonight with the city of Greenwood marking 55 years since a deadly tornado tore through the town. Thanks for joining us for your 5 News at 6. I'm Darren Bobb. In just 4 minutes, that tornado destroyed homes and businesses. It killed 13 people, left hundreds injured. 5 News reporter Jose Carranza spoke with the mayor of Greenwood, who remembers surviving that storm back in 1968.
55 years after a tornado came through Greenwood, Mayor Doug Kinslow and the community continue to remember that devastating day, which left 13 dead, hundreds injured, and many homes and businesses destroyed.
As everything was moving, the people were picking up their kids or getting ready to. It's a miracle that we didn't have more casualties or fatalities than that.
Kinslow only lived a few blocks from a school here on Daisy Street. The then 10-year-old was walking home from school through the storm here on Gary Street whenever someone stopped him and asked him to get in their car.
The wind was blowing so hard, there was a lot of shrubbery there, and it was the holly bush with the real sticky holly bushes, and so I ran over to grab one of those just to kind of get stable. Didn't feel a thing. I'm sure I was petrified or terrified, so I grabbed that bush. The wind actually brought me up off my feet.
Kinslow says he didn't know the extent of the damage. There were no cell phones back then, or even sirens. But his father, who owned a barbershop downtown, walked through all the destruction. After a second cup of coffee saved his life.
His barbershop was gone, totally gone, a pile of rubble. The cafe he was in had broken windows, but the structure was still there. Here my dad is walking home knowing his business is gone and not knowing if his family's still alive. And he's pausing just enough, not long, but he would pause if he came upon somebody and to check on them.
And while the community rebuilt and many came to help,
they came together and everybody did a great job and just built Greenwood back, and bigger and stronger and stronger for it.
People say that those 4 minutes in April of 1968 forever changed the community.
We built our house back, very same footprint. The foundation was there, but everything else was pretty much gone, but there was a lot of scattered brick. So my job and my siblings' job was to, as much as we could, would be to clean those brick, to reuse those brick. The thunderstorm comes up, and I mean, I didn't know that I would be scared like that, but I was pretty terrified. And I was quickly looking for a way to get to a house that we were living in after the tornado. We recently, in fact, it was kind of nervous. We had a hard time getting in our new sirens in here this last month. And there's so many people in town, as you mentioned, that are still here. That have their own individual stories, and there's probably a lot that haven't been told. We all have our own stories about the Greenwood tornado.
In Greenwood, covering news where you live, Jose Carranza, 5 News.
2 big additions they didn't have in place in 1968. The mayor says those tornado sirens are now up and running, and each school in town has a tornado shelter. People all across the nation also mourning the somber anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing today.
We just had some kind of explosion downtown.
Can you give me a location?
Northwest 5th, it sounds like a word smoke.
Northwest 5th?
That was audio of the first responders and video captured on the morning of April 19th, 1995, moments after the tragedy started unfolding 28 years ago. A truck bomb destroyed the Murrah Federal Building, killing 168 people. At the time, it was the deadliest terror attack in U.S. history, with the killings joined by around 700 injuries and an estimated $650 million in damage. Today, community members gathered to remember the lives lost that day. It happens every year at 8:30 with 168 seconds of silence before they read the names of all the victims. Oklahoma City Mayor also spoke on the heroic actions of first responders that day.
Recognizing that this date will always resurrect grief that defies the passage of time. And as always, on behalf of the people of Oklahoma City, I wish to express our gratitude to those who came to our aid from within and without our city. The first responders and rescuers who came from across the country will always be remembered and appreciated in Oklahoma City, and especially on this day.
Bomber Timothy McVeigh, who prosecutors say planned the attacks as revenge for the Waco siege of 2 years earlier, was convicted of federal murder charges and then executed. His co-conspirator Terry Nichols is serving 161 consecutive life sentences. Send you outside now. A live look along the Arkansas River in downtown Fort Smith from the U.S. Marshals Museum camera of ours that's right there on top of the building. A lot of cloud cover, Matt, a lot of wind, and a lot of humidity out there as well.
Yeah, you're getting all the ingredients you need for those thunderstorms. It says 75 degrees at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, but with the wind, it doesn't really feel like the 70s because it's just so breezy out there. Makes it feel cooler. So if you are headed out this evening, temperatures won't budge very much. They'll slowly drop, but that south wind's going to prevent them from just completely dropping into the overnight hours. But it's just cool out there, so make sure you bundle up just a little bit as you are headed out the door this evening. But let's talk about the severe zones. They have increased for tomorrow. That yellow color shows you the level 2 that now extends back west, including Fort Smith and Van Buren, back west to Poto, Kavanaugh Hill as well. Northwest Arkansas mainly at level 1. The farther west you go into Oklahoma, the storm threats start to decrease a little bit. So what's going to happen is this cold front comes in from the north and west. The problem is it's starting to slow down a little bit. It's kind of similar to what we had on Saturday. Very close setup here. But we're going to be watching these showers eventually turn into stronger thunderstorms. And within about 30 to 60 minutes, those thunderstorms that just start can start producing some hail. And that's why the threat gets even larger as you press farther south and east towards Clarksville, Paris, and Boonville. Our system is just off towards the west. We've got some storms in Oklahoma City this evening. I think we're safe, but eventually we'll have more of this activity tomorrow afternoon. We'll get you a better close of the timing as we go into your Thursday. That's coming up.
All right, Matt, thanks. Be sure to download the free 5 News app to get any notifications about watches and warnings issued during this week's storm threat. Now to McCurtain County, Oklahoma, where we're continuing to follow developments after violent and racist recordings that are allegedly of the sheriff and another county official. Tonight, we've learned that the county commissioner allegedly heard on those recordings has stepped down. Sheriff Kevin Clarity, pictured here, has yet to step down despite calls to do so from the governor and members of the state legislature. Sheriff Clarity says was also suspended last night from the State Sheriff's Association. The public first learned of the scandal late last week when the local newspaper there in McCurtain County reported on audio recordings where the sheriff and other county officials allegedly called for the lynching of 2 of the newspaper's reporters. It's led to protests this week at the county commissioners meeting, but the sheriff denies any wrongdoing. According to a statement he released this week, the sheriff says the audio was altered before it was handed over to media outlets. He says he believes the recordings were taken illegally. The governor says he's turned over the recordings to the FBI, and the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation also confirmed tonight it is launching its own investigation. We're getting a look tonight at surveillance video captured this week when a car slammed into a Fort Smith store. It happened yesterday at the True Grit Running Company store on Rogers. These are some pictures that were taken after the car crashed into the storefront yesterday morning. Fortunately, they say no one was hurt, but new video is showing what a close call it actually was. This is actually the surveillance video captured when that car crashed into the building right there. You can see someone was actually inside the store nearby when it slammed through the glass, even hit some of the benches where customers usually sit to be fitted for shoes. So the store expressed how fortunate they are that nobody was hurt. We're still waiting on an update from Fort Smith police on what caused this car, the driver of the car, to crash into the store. Unexpected is now back in downtown Fort Smith, at least for the next couple of days. The annual event brings artists from across the globe to the city to create murals and works of art. Jason Jones is an artist from our own area taking part in the project this year. We had a chance to catch up with him today as he started to work on his mural. He says he's assisted many of the international artists with their mural in the past on these projects and painted murals in other local communities, so he's been excited to get to work on his very first one for the Unexpected project.
I've had people come up to me and say, You know, I really can't afford to buy art myself, so just being able to see this every day just means a lot. So this just feels great.
Unexpected has been bringing art to Fort Smith buildings since it was founded back in 2015. Human papillomavirus, or HPV, is the most common sexually transmitted disease in the U.S. And tonight, new survey data from the American Association for Cancer Research shows people have become less aware that the virus causes cervical and other cancers like those of the mouth and throat. Dr. Bailey Lutz is a physician at Northwest Health. She says the vaccine to prevent HPV was only given to girls originally, but that's all changed now. She says the vaccine is recommended for all kids between the ages of 9 and 11. Lutz says many people never have symptoms, and for men, there's not an FDA-approved test for detection.
Millions of people a year are infected with HPV, and the good news is that most of our immune systems can clear that virus on its own in a couple years, but not everybody's does. And so if it sticks around, that's when it can cause cervical cancer or even genital warts in some people.
Dr. Ludd says you can protect yourself by limiting exposure and being comfortable telling your doctor if you think you may have been exposed.
I mean, this Little Rock is not cleaned up yet. Those victims are still affected. So we're definitely brainstorming on what we could do next, when and where.
Tornado recovery efforts continue in Little Rock more than 2.5 weeks after that deadly outbreak. We're going to share the story of how one Little Rock firefighter is helping his neighbors clean up.
Tomorrow, our tornado risk is low, but our hail risk is high once again. We're going to be watching this cold front move in from the west. We'll time out when we think those hailstones will start to develop and who has the highest chance for some of those hailstones. That's all coming up.
2.5 weeks after that deadly tornado outbreak in central Arkansas, Arkansans still looking for ways to help one another with recovery. After the storms hit on March 31st, it sparked an idea in one Little Rock firefighter to respond to the call for help outside of his job. Brooke Buckner shares us his story.
When Ron Hampton isn't fighting fires with the Little Rock Fire Department, he's organizing his next volunteer event.
It is something I feel strongly about.
Helping those impacted by last month's tornado, a disaster that hit close to home in every way.
My house wasn't affected, my family was fine, but shortly after the storm hit, I was messaging with a friend of mine, Nate, and he was like, man, how can I help?
That's when they came up with an idea to host cookouts and tornado relief events around central Arkansas with help from community activist Dawn Kokomo.
The first day we set up at Terry Elementary, which is right outside of the storm path, and we fed about 300-400 people that day, and we took up some donations.
They raised around $700 in just 8 hours.
It was a really beautiful thing because people were just coming through.
But it wasn't a one-day event. Hampton and about 50 other volunteers have handed out food, clothes, and household items 3 times this month.
And there were individuals from several different churches or several different businesses. I mean, we just had people from all walks of life, all ages. It was fun. There were kids out there helping us. So yeah, we had a good time.
And he even brought his own kids out to teach them the importance of giving back.
It was good to let them see the act of helping somebody in need. That's something I really want them to learn.
But there's a lot more work to be done.
The efforts are really ongoing. I mean, this Little Rock is not cleaned up yet. Those victims are still affected. So we're definitely brainstorming on what we could do next, when and where and how.
In Little Rock, Brooke Buckner, 5 News.
Well, maybe not tornadoes in our area, but we saw a lot of hail, especially in parts of the River Valley over the weekend. There's a chance of that happening again. Maybe not for us, Matt, but for those that were affected by the tornadoes a couple of weeks ago.
Exactly. It's just a mess. We're on this pattern where about every 5 days we're getting these storm systems passing on through. Tomorrow is our next chance for that severe weather. We have the higher hail risk, and then central Arkansas has the higher wind risk. We've been windy all day today. That south wind gusting sometimes over 30 miles per hour. It's still breezy out there, so even though temperatures are in the 70s, does it sometimes feel like the 70s just because it's so breezy in general. We'll follow the 60s by about 8 o'clock in northwest Arkansas. In the River Valley, we may not fall to the 60s, at least for some of us. closer until midnight. That south wind's also getting us pretty good right now. Tomorrow morning, waking up, checking with meteorologist Zach Scott. He'll have some light raindrops popping up on the radar for you in the morning. They should be more towards the sprinkle side of things. But then later in the afternoon, after lunchtime, that's when storm threat starts to come up. So between 1 to 4, we've got that chance in northwest Arkansas. After 4, I think we're looking pretty good. In the River Valley, 2 to 7. That's our time window. A little bit longer just because the River Valley's wider. But I think if you live in LaFleur County, Sequoia County, in around Fort Smith, it's going to be 2, 3, 4, maybe 5, and then closer to Ozark, Clarksville, and Paris and Boonville, it may be closer to 5, 6, 7, that latter half of the time frame. But hail is our primary threat. And the farther south and east you go, the storms will get larger over time. They'll start back off towards the west, but then over time they'll get bigger. And then eventually, once you can get the updraft form, so you'll see that red on the radar, once that starts to form, within about 30 minutes, you can start producing some hail. The system looks very similar to the one that we had Saturday. The only difference is last Saturday we had a bit more energy. So we'll see how that plays out. That means our hailstones may be a little bit smaller, but we're likely going to get some hail tomorrow afternoon. Here's a look at Futurecast overnight tonight. Just some clouds on and off, and then we got those showers in the morning. Later into the afternoon, we start getting those thunderstorms. They'll get bigger as they march east. Northwest Arkansas, maybe a level 1 severe threat, but they'll get pretty nasty, especially south and east of Fort Smith, and that's where we have that level 2 severe risk. And once the storms leave our neck of the woods, they'll start to become more wind-driven, but over us, they're definitely more hail-driven. So here's a look at Futurecast from a wider view. You see the storm starting to get going, 2, 3, 4 o'clock, and then they get real nasty and big with winds across central Arkansas. But the timing should be about 1 to 4 for many of us near the state line, 4 to 7 as you get towards the eastern River Valley. So watch out for the storms tomorrow. I think everyone's good by about sunset, and then one more shower Friday morning before we start to clear out a little bit this weekend. This weekend, though, it could get a little bit chilly.
Just talking to the coaches, they put in a plan together for me to be able to, fully maximize myself, maximize the summer. So I'm excited to get back on the grind and, come back and be able to do whatever it takes to win, wherever that leads me.
After the loss to UConn, we thought that soundbite you just heard might mean Jordan Walsh would come back to Fayetteville for another year. And while that's still possible, Walsh today made it known he has his sights set on the NBA. The Arkansas freshman declaring today for the NBA draft, making the announcement via an interview with HogSports.com. The former 5-star and McDonald's All-American averaged 7 points and nearly 4 rebounds per game, while developing, especially late in the season, into an elite wing defender for Eric Musselman's Razorbacks and their run to the Sweet 16. Walsh will, however, retain his eligibility, meaning he can come back to Arkansas after testing the draft process. Walsh is currently projected as a second-round pick by most mock drafts. Walsh becomes the 5th member of this past year's team to declare for the NBA draft. He's the 3rd of the 3 5-star McDonald's All-Americans, joining Anthony Black and Nick Smith Jr., meaning all 3 of them could wind up being one-and-dones. Walsh, along with Devo Davis, though, they're testing the draft waters while keeping their eligibility in case they want to come back. So it could be a while before we have a definitive picture of what the Hawks roster will officially look like next season. And coming up after the break, as the Diamond Hogs hit the road this week to Athens, they could be getting a prized arm back in the bullpen. A status update on Brady Tygart when we come back. The Diamond Hogs just keep on rolling. Arkansas 30-7 on the season after a win last night against UCA. And the Razorbacks sit well positioned to host through Super Regionals come NCAA tournament time. A good portion of this season, they've played without one of their best arms, though, in Brady Tygart. Tygart entered this season as a preseason All-American after impressing last year as a freshman. He picked up where he left off, though, shutting the door in the opening win over Texas down in Arlington. But that's one of only 4 games Tygart has played in this year. He's been out since March 1st with a UCL injury. With Tygart's absence, Dave Van Horn has had to do some reshuffling in that Arkansas bullpen, including moving Hagen Smith out of the Friday night starter role. Well, now the Hogs pitching staff seems to be in a good groove with some young arms that have stepped up. And now they seem poised to add Tygart back to the mix as early as this weekend against Georgia.
There's a possibility he'll probably be on the 27-man. That's the key. You see him on there, you probably see him throw.
And in other news for Arkansas, finally today, we have the Hogs' first player transferring away from the program this spring. Wide receiver Landon Rogers announcing today he's entering the transfer portal. A Little Rock native, Rogers came to Arkansas as a 3-star prospect out of Parkview in the class of 2021. Rogers joined the Hogs as a quarterback, but he quickly moved to receiver. He played in one game in 2021 against UAPB, and then he did not see any action this past season. Matt's back with another look at tonight's forecast after the break.
You've got this to-do list of things you want to make sure that we get done in this first 100 days, and I'm proud of the fact we were able to do that.
Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders reflecting after her first 100 days in office. We're going to hear a lot more from the governor coming up tonight on your 5 News at 10. For now, Matt, let's talk about the timing of what we can expect for tomorrow.
Yeah, so very different for Northwest Arkansas and the River Valley. Northwest Arkansas, 1 to 4. After 4 o'clock, I think you're good. In fact, I've had a lot of questions. I've got it at 5 or 6 p.m. in Northwest. I think you're okay. By then, the storms really hit the River Valley. The River Valley's timing is anywhere from 2 to 7, closer to the 2 for Podo and Fort Smith and Van Buren, closer to the 6-7 once you get to Clarksville and Paris and Subiaco and Ozark. After about sunset or so, which is near 8 o'clock now, we should be good. And then there could be a straight shower Friday morning, but then I think we clear out for the weekend.
And it gets cold this weekend.
Yeah, good thing there's no baseball or softball at home this week. People can stay indoors, watch some TV, not worry about the cold weather.
That's right.
Yeah.
Folks, thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here tonight at 10. Have a good evening.